Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We have an amazing event today, Equity in the Age of AI, Lessons from Open Education. What a title, what a topic. And this is an event organized by the Knowledge Equity Network and our colleagues and friends from GoGN. And I'm very pleased, very actually honored to be chairing this session because this is a fascinating topic for me, but also because of the quality of the speakers that we have today in our session. This is this is going to be a truly exciting event in which we are going to reflect upon, very contemporary important challenges. So yeah, thank you very much for the invitation to chair this event, and thank you to our friends and colleagues Shironica Karunanayaka and Rajiv Jhangiani for joining us. I will introduce our speakers. We have Shironica Karunanayaka. She's a senior professor in educational technology at the Open University of Sri Lanka. She has served in key leadership roles, including Dean of the Faculty of Education. She's also a chair of the Commonwealth of Learning and a member of the board of Open Education Global. And she has a magnificent reputation for advancing open education internationally. And her current work explores ICT in education, open educational practices, and crucially, generative AI in learning. And we also have Dr. Rajiv Jhangiani, who is the Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning at Brock University in Ontario, Canada. He's also a global leader in open education. He's a member of the Board of Directors of Open Education Global, and he is recognized internationally for his work on student-centered pedagogies, critical pedagogy, and ethical educational technology. And he has advised the British Columbia Ministry for Post-Secondary Education on digital learning strategies, micro-credentials, and ethical frameworks for educational technology. So thank you very much to both of you, Shironika and Rajiv, for joining us here in this special event. And this event is organized by the Knowledge Equity Network and our colleagues from GoGN. And we would like to invite you to read our Declaration of Knowledge Equity. We are a network that is committed to defending, upholding, bringing to life the principles of open education, open research, open science, open knowledge, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. We are universal, collaborative, inclusive, and we're focused on sustainability. And currently, we have 420 individuals who have signed the declaration and are part of our network. But our network is open to higher education institutions as well. We have 28 signatories of our declaration and 51 organizations spanning across the globe, 69 countries. So I'd like to invite you, if you're not a member, if you haven't signed the declaration, there is no membership really. If you haven't signed the declaration, I would invite you to read it and sign it. It'd be fantastic to count on you in this shared endeavor. And now I can see that there are colleagues and friends from all over the world in the chat. Please feel free to introduce yourselves to others and use this chat as a sharing experience as well. I'm gonna let my colleague Beckpith to introduce GoGN, who is also organizing the event with us. Thank you very much, Beth.
Oh, thanks so much, Antonia, and it's wonderful to be here today with you all. Thanks so much for everyone for joining, and it's just such a thrill to be here with Rajiv and Shironica and Antonia and rest of our colleagues and friends from the Knowledge Equity Network. We're delighted to be partnering with them on this six-session webinar series focused on equity. So my name is Beck Pitt. I'm co-director of the Global OER Graduate Network, and we primarily support doctoral researchers working on open education around the world. We'd like to warmly invite you to join the network. If you're not a doctoral researcher, you can still get involved. We have a wide community of practice of anyone that's interested in the work that we're doing. So please do check out, find out more on the QR code on the top right-hand corner here. Next slide, please. One of the things that we do, as well as collaborating on fantastic webinar series like this, is we also produce collaborative resources with the network. You can find some of them available on the QR code here, and they include things like our Research Methods Handbook and our Conceptual Frameworks Guide, as well as EDI guidelines and other resources. Next slide, please. Thanks. As I mentioned, this is part of a wonderful webinar series that we're co-hosting with the Knowledge Equity Network, and we're delighted to showcase some of the future sessions here as well. So please do join us for upcoming sessions. Next week on Thursday, the 9th of October, we'll be looking at implementing EDI practices in open education. So please do join us then and have a wonderful session today. We're really delighted that you're here with us. Thanks so much, and back to you, Antonio.
Thank you very much, Beck, and we are really thrilled and pleased for this collaboration. So I'm going to share a few thoughts before we start. Some kind of provocation, although I don't think our speakers would really need any provocation. But I'd like to share some reflections. You know, generative artificial intelligence is transforming knowledge production and consumption, including education and learning. There is a famous title of a Canadian communication theorist called Marsha McLuhan, who says that the title of the book is "The Medium is the Message." And I think, well, with that sentence, McLuhan wanted to emphasize the importance of the medium itself in shaping human perception and human behavior. What I think is happening now with artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence, is that the medium is not also the message. The medium is the messenger, you know, and that can be frightening, yeah? Generative artificial intelligence is clearly an instrument that supports knowledge production. Is becoming somehow a source of information. I wouldn't say a source of knowledge, a source of content. And these contents infiltrate and penetrate our information and knowledge ecosystems. How can we ensure that knowledge and language and cultural production and education remain under control of our communities? This is a question of knowledge democratization. And to me, it's also a matter of sustainability, knowledge sustainability. I think we should invent the new number 18 sustainable development goal, knowledge and cultural sustainability, because we really need to look after our shared human, cultural, epistemological heritage. Yeah. Another thought, and I'll finish with this: if knowledge is going to be shaped and even produced in different ways, yeah, with the intervention of generative AI, how is it validated? How do we ensure that it's trustworthy? In the field of education, what happens now is that we're going to have a flurry of open education resources produced with AI or produced by AI. The Dubai Declaration of 2024 on OER and artificial intelligence tries to provide some guidelines about this, and we can perhaps discuss this. But I like also to have a positive perspective, or perhaps adopt a more positive and constructive perspective. You know, perhaps we, the communities, can appropriate the different technologies of artificial intelligence, and I don't mean the products, but the technologies. They are different things, and appropriate them for the common good, for the public interest. Yeah. What if we decide to engage constructively with AI and tame it and domesticate it to fulfill our goals? So let us dream for 30 seconds. Imagine what would happen.
Folks, I know that Antonio is joining us from a conference lobby somewhere, and I fear that his connection may have gotten tampered with a little bit. But I do know that one of the next things he was going to do is hand things over to Shironica to share a bit of an introduction and overview of her background as well. So if it's okay, Tom, I'm looking across at you.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Shironica.
Right. All right. Hello, everyone. So greetings from Sri Lanka. And thank you very much. I would like to thank Gojian and Knowledge Equity Network, Ken, for inviting me for this webinar. So let me share a few slides. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm from the Open University of Sri Lanka, which is the only open university in Sri Lanka. So I've been there for more than 30 years now. And have been engaged in several projects in relation to, initiatives in relation to promoting open educational resources, open educational practices, and doing research as well. Integrating generative AI is something that we have approached recently. So I took this, as a faculty member from the education. I'm from the Faculty of Education at the Open University of Sri Lanka, where we do, training, teacher training, training educators. So I thought of just focusing on opportunities and challenges for educators, especially for open educators in relation to AI and equity. So let me just remind, I know all of you are aware of educational equity, but just remind ourselves before we move on to generative AI or AI, an equitable education system where we would provide every student to achieve their potential, whatever their personal or social circumstances are. That means opening doors for all learners and giving them fair opportunities to succeed in the future. So this is closely connected with open education, which all of us are promoting through open educational resources, OER, and open educational practices, OEP. We are promoting educational equity and inclusivity and embracing diversity. So all those things are happening. Now with the artificial intelligence coming into the picture with very rapidly, which is transforming education and educational practices, we know that it offers many opportunities for us as educators to bridge these equity gaps. But at the same time, there are so many challenges and concerns about various risks that are also there, which sort of deepen the equity gaps. So let us have a quick look at some of these opportunities and challenges, which we can discuss later at the end. So, okay. The potentials. I believe all of us are experimenting with AI now, with all these tools that are being developed. Really, we see how easy it becomes to cater to diverse learning needs using these multimodal facilities and and catering to children with special educational needs and enhancing creativity supporting teachers to become more innovative and creative in their teaching practices, and as well as supporting learners by using the personal tutors, or especially in our context, like where we are like not non-native speakers of English language, we are second English as a second language, where the language support is offered, as well as enhancing our work efficiency, time management for teachers to create lesson plans or mark assessments, using different tools to create learning resources. So all those things are giving us opportunities to support our students who are diverse students with different capabilities and in different contexts, to support their diverse needs. At the same time, the crucial thing is these various challenges that are happening along with these opportunities. For example, the digital divide, which we all know, even before AI, the digital divide is already there. I mean, even to use now when we are doing it, especially in our context, the accessibility to infrastructure, lack of limited infrastructure, and maybe electricity failures, then internet access. So many issues are there. Now, this digital divide has now become AI divide, where not only, I mean, all these things, they all impact on using AI for certain parties which are maybe in the remote areas, or, who do not have access to these resources, as well as the cost, because these tools are coming with a cost. I mean, the companies that provide free to some limit, but if you want more, more facilities, you have to pay. So there is this AI divide, who the haves and have-nots having unequal access and unequal opportunities, as well as the bias in AI algorithms, like biased data sets, inaccuracies in data. Now, there are so many research that has been done, experiments done with these AI tools, where you see this, because these are like tools. They are not human, so they are very, the dependence on these data sets which are produced in different contexts. We can see this cultural and linguistic exclusion, where certain cultures, languages are excluded. Mostly the data sets are being trained basically in English language most of the time, and catering to certain groups of or cultures, where certain cultures are excluded. So that sort of inequity also happens. Then ethical concerns. We do not know now the content we get, where they get it from, the privacy, transparency, accountability, whether they are taken with consent, our data. So those are the challenges we face. And at the same time, as teachers and learners, we see this overdependence on AI, where the critical thinking and creative thinking is being diminished to some extent because of this cognitive offloading. And also, most of the time, teachers are unprepared because they know the AI tools are there, but lack of guidelines, maybe not having enough confidence or enough information. So unpreparedness also is a challenge faced. So with all these things, I would like to like the role of educators. Actually, we are open educators. So what I was thinking as an educator, what we can do within our capacity to support teachers and learners as educators. So I would like to briefly share with you a recent project that we did at the Open University of Sri Lanka, where integration of generative AI into teacher education programs happened as a project supported by the Commonwealth of Learning, where we did this intervention with teachers, teacher educators, and student teachers. Now, at the Faculty of Education, we are doing teacher training for different groups of students who are student teachers. So the main thing is this was designed based on this UNESCO AI competency framework, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, which gave a very good framework for us to focus on 5 aspects, not only on the tools, but also on the pedagogical aspects, the ethics of AI, and making sure that they are familiar with this responsible use and meaningful use of AI rather than just depending on the tools. So I will quickly tell the strategies we used, multiple strategies where both the teacher educators and teachers work together collaboratively, exploring, experimenting, and trying to find out different ways of using AI, integrating generative AI into our teacher education programs. The main thing is this collaboration between our students and teachers working together, co-creating resources and finding out resources and sharing them in the Moodle learning management system. And they were supported with this compilation of resources and a series of webinars by experts in the field, so that all these support with the supportive activities, they realized both the opportunities and the challenges and how to overcome. So the main thing is to think from a human-centered approach. The human agency is more important rather than relying or depending on the tool. So empowering teachers and learners in this manner, I think it's very important, as well as inclusive AI development, investing in infrastructure, clear policies, and research. So what are the lessons we can get from OEP, which we are promoting? We have been promoting this for a long time, but now there seems to be a threat to open educational practices because of this AI, because we do not know because of the lack of transparency or the reliability of the accuracy of the content we are getting. So what's our thinking about how to link these open education practices with responsible use of AI? So making tools more accessible, making more open AI tools, multilingual accessibility, and then collaboration and co-creation. Those things are very important for us to think about designing learning environments where everybody will be very clear and aware about these issues and think together, collaboratively, work towards how to overcome or how to face and overcome these challenges. So I believe I mean, my personal belief is we have to work together, collaboratively, cooperatively, and co-creatively to design and demand and defend equity in AI. So that's why exploring opportunities, addressing challenges, and engaging in meaningful discourses such as these becomes very important. So let me stop there, and I think we can discuss these points later at the end of the, at the discussion time. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks so much, Shironica. And just in Antonio's repeated absence because of, I think, possibly a further power cut, I'd love to hand over to you, Rajiv.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm just going to also quickly share a set of slides with folks. I just want to provide a brief introduction or overview, and I'm keen to get to the discussion. And while we're doing that, I think the chat, of course, is open, folks, and I think we're going to be using the Q&A function as well for the discussion. So please feel free to pepper your thoughts or even your questions in advance. But in the meantime, let me see if I can just quickly share my screen over here. I think that should be coming through. So this is, of course, me, and I just thought I'd share a couple of things. One, of course, I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you all from my home, which is on the west coast of Canada, in the traditional ancestral and unceded territories of the Squamish First Nation, which are among the Coast Salish peoples here in Canada. The context in which I work, of course, is in many ways relatively privileged when we talk about Canadian post-secondary education. But I think, as I'll speak to with my work in open education briefly, I think there's this veneer of access and equity. And then once you start to scratch the surface a little bit, you can see the many, many ways in which education, even over here, is really structured in ways that reinforces and replicates existing societal power hierarchies. And of course, one of the issues that we've dealt with a lot that maybe exemplifies this in North America is the issue of things like textbook costs. So just by way of background, as an educator, of course, I was very interested in serving my students, and where I saw an existing open textbook that could be used, I adapted it, and now happily it's in its 4th edition. But much of my work has been focused on OER and scaling those efforts within post-secondary institutions. So just touching on some of these issues, which I think will then bridge our conversation to talking about AI, because it's similar, some of the shared challenges and some of the values that we're looking to advance over here, right? There are obviously access issues with things like materials, learning materials, course resources in Canada. This is work that we did back in 2017, and of course, it showed some of these equity gaps. It's more recently been done again with my research team last year at my new institution, Brock University, and we see a similar thing. But part of what lies behind some of these access challenges, students saying that they're not purchasing required course materials due to their high cost, is that these choices are disproportionately likely to be made by first-generation students, racialized students, students with disabilities, and so on. And we know, of course, thankfully, that certainly working with OER, students assigned free and open resources tend to perform the same as, if not better than, those assigned expensive commercial books. So in the context of my own work, a lot of the energy was focused on moving out of individual educators' classrooms to try and scale up institutional supports. And this is, again, going to be a common thread with our discussions with AI, right? Not leaving individual educators to their own devices, having a consistent, structured approach with supports, with supportive policies, with incentives that are aligned, but thinking through that we're not doing harm with the very best of intentions. So certainly at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, where I was for 15 years or so, we built entire degree programs that utilized OER and other resources that had no cost for students. And over many, many years, of course, it saved students a lot of money. But more to the point, in addition to saving students money, it actually benefited them academically as well. So there were really positive educational outcomes, everything from fewer students withdrawing from courses to students actually performing better. And so this is maybe an example of how you can address equity and quality and, in fact, performance, student success at the same time. One is not a trade-off for the other. Another kind of thread of my own work has been in the realm of open pedagogy that I think many people will know about in this community. And this is really, again, looking at what we can do differently when it comes to teaching and learning. And so I'll point to some of the scholarship over here as well, while pointing to maybe a resource called the Open Pedagogy Notebook that attempted to just share examples in practice of this kind of work. But a lot of the work in this space really tries to take equity and access very seriously. So, you can think about with great excitement using OER, but if you're undercompensating faculty members for their labor in creating OER, you're not doing yourself justice, or you're not really living your values as an open educator. You can do work with students with open assignments where they're contributing to public scholarship. But if you mandate that they do this, if you disregard the risks of open scholarship, particularly for racialized students, you are again doing harm with the very best of intentions. And so a lot of the scholarship in the space that I've been involved in is focused on how we can still advance social justice while leveraging all of the power of open practices, right? You can do harm if you do this unthinking, if you just think about it in terms of it being engaging and innovative as a learning experience. But I think a lot of it for me comes back to maybe this graphic, and I credit our colleague Brian Mathers for designing this for us when I was at KPU. But I'll constantly talk about how if you design for the margins, then of course everybody benefits. The trouble is most of our approaches in education design for the mode, for the higher part of the distribution in the middle, and that's where we can do real damage as well. So, whether we're talking about institutional structures, like let's say, and I'm just throwing out examples of here, intellectual property policies, or if you're talking about things like tenure and promotion policies, it is important that T&P policies, like as the case at Brock, recognize work involved in creating OER, for example. And if you're talking about institutional strategies for OER or indeed AI, it is important that we not pay lip service to some of the ethical considerations that Shironica has spoken to so well already. So on those lines, I'll maybe foreshadow where I'm going with this by sharing this. One of the most recent developments for us at Brock was the adoption of an ethical framework for educational technologies writ large, and you're seeing some of the principles that are enshrined within that new policy. We hope that it's a model for others as well. It mirrors similar work that's happening out of the ministry in British Columbia as well, but what institutions have typically done, again, especially when technologies come out of Silicon Valley, where the emphasis on profit, on return on investment for venture capitalists is so strong that ethics are not particularly top of their list of considerations, right? And so there is a great promise, no doubt, with AI, and that's a lot of my recent discussions with educators in Oman, recently at the Pan Commonwealth Forum in Botswana. There are serious access issues around the world. If we're talking about assistive technologies and how they can benefit from AI, if we're talking about basic access to knowledge as well. But maybe to provide a bit of a counterpoint to what Antonio shared at the start, perhaps Antonio's right that AI is not just a medium, but also a messenger. But my fear is, and I have to think this analogy through a bit more, my fear is that it's more of a knowledge smuggler rather than a knowledge messenger. I think there's questions about provenance, there's questions about legality, there's theft of intellectual property, there's obviously issues related to quality as well. And there is this real risk of widening inequities. And again, as I've said, doing harm with the very best of intentions. I do think, and I'll stop maybe sharing my screen at this point as well, but I do think there are lots of similarities between when we talk about open education or OER even and AI, right? There is need to attend to things like digital and information literacies, whether we're doing open pedagogy with students or creating OER. We need to think about IP issues, privacy issues, data sovereignty issues, right? There's reasons why open educational resource production groups like BC Campus, for example, have really had to think a lot about, are we just going to embed learning analytics into our OER used around the world, or are we going to take seriously learner agency, data privacy, for example? You need to think about the implications of labor across both of these movements, the possibilities and the challenges for learning assessment, certainly, and the importance of partnering with students. But I do think there's many areas where open education and AI diverge as well. Right, with AI, there's this sort of inevitability narrative that's out there, which is it doesn't matter, don't try to resist, it's going to be there anyway, it's already pervading everything. But there is this paradox of participation if you ignore those at the margins, right? So if you think about indigenous groups, let's say traditional knowledge, there's a fear that if they don't contribute to the corpus that's training AI, that they are effectively being erased from the future of search engines. But if they do, they're having to give over traditional, sometimes sacred knowledge. And this is true with linguistic minorities as well. Lots of other examples. There's obviously an environmental impact with AI that, again, people continue to pay lip service to. Attribution is obviously a cornerstone of OER, and I see Cable Green in the audience, and I want to pay tribute to the good work that Creative Commons is doing, and they're working towards CC signals, which will help us in this space. But attribution is typically fairly opaque with AI. And again, with open pedagogy, we want to emphasize learner agency, again, in the tradition of critical pedagogy as much as possible. Whereas with AI, we throw out the word agency, and now we're talking about agentic AI, which increasingly, of course, reduces the amount of human intermediation that's required. And so I will point to, for those of you who are unaware, there's a wonderful student manifesto on AI that was developed by students at the London School of Economics. And I'll try to post a link in the chat, or perhaps somebody else can as well. But to me, this is a really good example of foregrounding, of centering the student voice when it comes to questions around AI. So, I'm very interested in how we can advance this work, not simply pay lip service to some of these ethical considerations, and do this thoughtfully in a way that supports educators, that doesn't leave them to the mercy of nor Silicon Valley, nor some of this unwanted change within the sector. So maybe it's the last thing I'll say over here is I do think it's an exciting moment. There's a lot of possibility for good. There's a lot of potential for harm. And this is where the critical discussions, including the ones we're having today, will be valuable. So, Antonio, maybe if I can hand things back to you, I'd love to now move to more of a discussion and benefit from questions and comments from the attendees as well. Oh, I see Antonio's not back yet either.
Yeah,
back, Tom.
He's not. No, hi. Thanks, Rajiv. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. And welcome back onto the screen, Beck and Shironica. Let's go to one of the questions just in the chat at the moment from Vidminas, if that's okay. So AI systems can generally be viewed either as social actors or as tools. I think of it as a difference between the AI system created OER and she used an AI system to create OER. Do you think both views can be appropriate, or should we as educators, researchers, practitioners favor one over the other? Who'd like to start?
Shironica, did you want to go first?
Yeah. Okay. So from an educator's point of view, I would go with the second one because teaching or learning with AI to create, because the AI, generative AI works according to the prompts we give, right? So the prompting is done by us. So if we don't get what we need, we give more, if you totally depend on what, you just give one prompt, and if you depend on what it gives you, then the AI created OER. But if you have the idea, and if you want to get what you really want from the AI, you have to engage in a very meaningful discussion dialogue with the tool. And then together with the tool, you create the resource you need. So I think she used an AI system to create OER. I think that's what should be happen. But at the same time, I have my concerns about if it's an OER, we have to adopt a license. But to adopt a license, we should know whether the resources used to create whatever that resource, with what are their licenses, because we do not know from where those have been taken. So I don't know. Personally, I think there's an issue here. make sure it's an OER. I don't know, that's that's an issue I feel. Anyway, so I think Rajiv, you can elaborate more on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I love this question, right? Because I love the theory that it's speaking to. So I will say I do think it's a great danger in engaging or in um, anthropomorphizing AI, right? So there's the he, she, and just as a small illustration of this, thinking of AI as an individual, something with actual agency, which of course it doesn't have. It doesn't have transparency. It doesn't have accountability. AI cannot serve as a standalone author for this reason in terms of copyright. If you're talking about liability, and let's say Air Canada is an example of an airline that used AI-driven chatbots, and in one case gave incorrect advice to somebody asking for a refund on a flight. The organization is responsible for that bad advice, just as a chatbot used for academic advising that gives students incorrect advice about program requirements. The institution is responsible for that. The chatbot is not responsible for that because it doesn't have agency. But also environmentally, right? The more we treat it as an individual, as a human, which it isn't, the more we say please and thank you at the beginning and end of our queries, we are actually inadvertently adding to the environmental toll. Every one of those queries costs additional water on the servers that cool these systems. So I do think there's several dangers over here. But overall, I think it plays into the fact that these are often a black box, right? Despite the use of terms like open AI as the name of an organization that is far from open, of course, and it runs danger of open washing. It leads us to sort of reduce our likelihood of wanting to know how that black box works if we treat it and think of it as an individual. So even as there are lots of employees who are losing their jobs because they're being replaced with, quote, teams of AI, or people are saying, I supervise a team of AI bots. This is not the same thing, of course, right? So, and leveraging AI, and again, this is where I say there's a huge difference between agentic AI, but even agentic AI, even if it involves much less human intermediation, it still requires a human to take that accountability, right? So you can have today, I'm not saying this is a good thing, the way agentic AI works, you can have educators who provide their login credentials to agentic AI from ChatGPT, for example, have it go in and grade learning assessments and students' discussion forums without them ever looking at it. But the educator is the one who's ultimately responsible. So I hope I'm pointing to some of the dangers I see in being casual in our use of language, which will eventually shape how we think about these technologies.
Great, thank you. Beck, over to you. Do you want to present the next question?
Yeah, thanks so much, Tom, and thanks, Shironica and Rajiv, for sharing such fantastic insights, and really appreciated. We've got a couple of questions coming in the Q&A as well, so thanks so much to the folks for those. We'll go to Rob's first. And Rob asks, from an equity perspective, is access to AI something that should be spread as widely as possible? Should we be thinking more about sharing AI literacies? So I don't know who wants to maybe jump in with some thoughts around that. Shironica, would you like to come in?
Yes, yes, I do believe AI literacy is very important. Because just, having there are so many tools. I mean, every day something new is coming, so many tools that we can't cope up with. But without literacy, if you just try to use tools, then I don't think that that would be a good thing, because the responsible use of AI, or the meaningful use of AI, ethical use of AI, those are the things that we are concerned about. So that's why the literacy is needed. That's why as educators, I believe that's our role, our responsibility as educators to make aware of these issues, because sometimes people do not think about these things, but just use it as just a tool. just a tool to make your work easier, to do your work quickly, but without thinking about these other issues. So I think literacy is very, very important.
Yeah, I would agree. And maybe I'll add the notion of critical literacy over here, right? Because, you know, I think we often mean that in passing, but really a critical understanding and evaluation. But I do think we need to question and check this inevitability narrative that's increasingly out there. We hear pressure from industry, certainly around the odd survey from Microsoft and LinkedIn talking about how employers would rather hire students with AI skills rather than traditional degrees in some cases, for example, right? And this is a false dichotomy, of course, because we have to think about the training we provide to students, and often industry doesn't quite know what they want either. And so there's some space in between over there. But equipping students to navigate a world where AI is increasingly proliferating, where it's invisibly, right, permeating our platforms. You don't have to, it's not a discrete, separate thing. I'm now accessing an AI platform. Well, if you use Microsoft Word, it's all over it. If you're using Zoom right now, it's all over it, clearly. Seemed to have kicked Antonio out when Antonio was talking about taming it anyway. But the distinction is not clear anymore. So equipping students to live and work in that world, absolutely. Equipping students to make decisions around when it's appropriate, if it's appropriate, right? There's a wonderful article I read about, even if you think about, students using AI as chatbots, there's a bit of this that's ludicrous because they need to have enough expertise to determine whether the chatbot is actually giving them accurate information, relevant information or not. And again, simply uncritically digesting the sales literature out of Silicon Valley is not going to do us a service at all. We will do real and serious harm over here. We've seen this in education time and time and time again. When we were teaching remotely during the pandemic, a lot of institutions uncritically embraced surveillance technologies like remote exam proctoring, only to discover down the line, after spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, that the algorithms were disproportionately flagging students with darker skin tones as cheating, for example. And today with AI detection tools, it's particularly hilarious because you have the literal arsonist who's now running around selling you a faulty fire extinguisher on the other end because the AI detection tools itself are terribly unreliable and biased as well. So I think the critical piece is going to be essential, but and I'm seeing some of the comments in the chat as well. It's a challenging conversation to navigate, right? Because again, there's this sense of if you don't, you're going to be left out. And yes, there's an opportunity. In some cases, there are countries, particularly across the global south, that are looking to establish AI-first universities that are in effect leapfrogging a lot of the things that are happening in the Western world, for example. But again, when you're talking about an organization like Facebook providing internet access to rural areas, if you're talking about anything associated with Elon Musk, for that matter, related to internet access in places, including in South Africa and other places where you see their work taking place. One has to be very wary of this new, it's almost like a data neocolonialism and what is being paid for, how is this being paid, what is being taken control of in this infrastructure. So I think there's a reason why we've tried to invest so much in open infrastructure, in open education. And I think one of the dangers of an uncritical adoption of, yes, let's simply swallow the sales literature coming out of Silicon Valley uncritically, is you can end up in a situation where you're really imperiling not just your finances, not just student outcomes, but you're really betraying the very values that brought you to this work in the first place. And I think that's the real danger. So criticality, I think, is going to be a cornerstone of what we do moving forward.
And just following on from that, Rajiv, do you think educators and institutions should prioritize Gen AI for the use and for co-development that are based on, say, digital public goods principles?
Yeah, I think it's a powerful approach, right? Right now, you still see, how do I say this? I mean, I think, there's some approaches, and I'm thinking about learning assessment over here in particular. Denying that AI exists, attempting to prohibit its use. None of those are viable strategies in 2025 and beyond. But even when you're looking to leverage it in different ways to enhance the learning environment with assessments as well, you can still do it in a way that is more instructor-centered as opposed to in partnership with students. You can still do it in a way that is less a reflection of the approach to public goods that you're referring to as well. So I think, that's where the institution needs to come in. Education, training, infrastructure, sandboxing, policies, guardrails. It cannot be uncritical. It cannot be, done in a way that and I say this because often it's senior administrators that fall prey to these kinds of sales pitches and the sense of being left out by their competitors or left behind effectively. But yeah, I think there's a better way to do things. And conversations like this are a good place to set the tone. But again, I will point to things like ethical frameworks, to even the series, in fact, that Shironica has been hosting out of the OUSL has been a tremendous source of learning and professional development for many around the world. So more of this.
Great, thank you. And actually, Shironica, I wanted to pick up on something from your slides. You mentioned that equity needs to be prioritized right at the start, but in a sense, it feels like every moment that passes, we get further and further away from that start point where we can kind of embed it. And I just wondered what your thoughts were around that. How do we reset or catch up on ourselves, or how do we acknowledge that maybe that moment has passed, and what do we do next then?
Yeah, so the thing is, now we are embracing this AI like, a new tool. I mean, like something new comes, everybody start embracing it. Then embracing AI, but with that mindset that, now this equity is linked with open education, where we consider education as a common good to be shared by everybody. But those principles are being challenged now because of AI, because what's being shared now, when we are sharing, we do respect the copyrights, the attribution, acknowledging. All those things are there when we do share in that manner. But with AI, we do not know. That's a concern. So that's why this capacity development, I think there was a question about capacity development intervention. That's why the capacity, the literacy, awareness raising, and continuous capacity development. It's not just, just one workshop. Now the intervention we did it through 6 months, but I would like to continue it further because of the rapid, things happening, the changes happening. We do not know what's happening next, because what to expect. That's the scary part. So the risks we do not know. I mean, just now we see certain risks, but in the future there may be certain other risks that we do not know. So that's why I feel equity being the main concern. So we must have that in our mindset. This is our now, as open educators, we are promoting open education, we are promoting sharing, but how do we do it with the support of AI? That's how we have to together. I mean, as educators, we have to engage in this sort of discussions, dialogues, and come up with solutions together. I think that's the important thing. I'm also new to this. I mean, in our context, this was the very first intervention we did in our university. So we are learning, we are experimenting, but that has to happen together. And that's why, as Rajiv mentioned, that's why I invited experts from different countries, international experts, to this series of webinars, which was a resource for our capacity development intervention. It was really, really useful for everybody, including myself. We learned a lot from their own experiences. So, I mean, from different angles, different aspects. So, the other thing is we have shared all those webinars as in our, I mean, during the process, we released, I mean, the Open University opened an YouTube channel called Open Education OUSL, where all these webinars are uploaded, which is a very good resource, I think, for everybody. It's shared. I mean, I can share the link in the chat box. And also, we compiled a website with organized resources on different aspects, which is also a useful resource for all educators. I mean, I shared it with our teachers and student teachers, but it's open for anybody. It's called Gen AI for TED in WordPress document. So those are the little things that we could do within our capacity. But I think when everybody does little things and get together with such organizations like y'all, Gojin and Ken, now even this webinar itself is a great opportunity for us to discuss these things and think about solutions, to design solutions for the future.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Shironica, and for sharing more on the amazing work that you've been doing recently as well. That's really wonderful. And thank you for answering Salad's question in the chat as well. There's quite a few questions kind of coming in as well, which is really great. So thanks so much to everybody for sharing those. We're going to go to the next Q&A question next from Sukaina, who asked, and I'll read it out here. Are we in danger of trying to shoehorn the principles of open education, OEP, and open pedagogy to the way the prominent AI tools and systems operate in reality, e.g. principles of transparency and attribution seem difficult to reconcile with the way LLMs are built and are still essentially black boxes? Thanks, Sukaina. So Rajiv, if it's all right to go to you first, thanks so much.
Sure. Sukaina, it's so great. It's so great to have you over here. Yeah, I think you're right. We are absolutely in danger of it. But I think part of what I'm happy to have the discussion focus on as well is when we talk about the principles, the values of open education, one of the reasons why they gain such ready traction within education systems in general is that those values are often reflected in our own mission, vision, values, strategic plans at universities, right? There's goals, very explicit goals about widening access, about advancing student success, about innovating with teaching and learning, for example. And there's serious efforts that are enabled, unlocked, supported, catalyzed with open education. I think part of the reason I'm happy for this discussion to be explicit is there are places where these overlap with how AI can work. But there are serious gaps as well. And I think that's where, I'm happy to talk about not just about the values of open education, but frankly, even just how education works, how learning works, and why increasingly, and maybe I should mention this along with the whole sort of AI literacy, is, there's a reason why there's such explicit discussions today about the importance of metacognition when interacting with AI, the importance of students understanding when it's appropriate and when it's not, and what they're giving up when they're engaging in cognitive offloading when it comes to the learning process, and sort of delegating parts of that to AI, and the de-skilling that they are actively partnering to engage with. So I don't think you're wrong. I think there are pieces over here that don't fit well at all, and part of it is because we are not, an institution that is, how do I say this? A primary duty to students is really difficult to reconcile with a primary obligation to shareholders, and I think that's why you're often going to see some friction in the approaches that come from Silicon Valley and the approaches that come from educators. And so while some will critique higher education saying, look how quickly Silicon Valley moves, yes, they move fast. and they break things. We cannot break things. We have to be a lot more careful. And so while I think higher education is rightly criticized sometimes for being fairly conservative, there is value in going a bit slower when it comes to something like AI, particularly with how quickly it's developing, and being a lot more thoughtful. So I appreciate your question. I think the tension is quite real. And I also want to acknowledge that the situation that educators are in today, right? It's overwhelming, the amount of change and challenge, and the burden that continues to be placed on institutions of higher education to preserve this notion of academic integrity at a time when the nature of learning is changing, when the nature of how what cheating and plagiarism looks like perhaps needs to evolve at a time when human AI hybrid writing is increasingly common as well. And so it's a difficult time to be an educator, but it's a lot easier if your institution comes to the fore and says, well, we're going to do this a bit more thoughtfully, a bit more safely. We'll have a local tenant. We're not going to supply the data to the cloud. We're going to have some consistent policies and protections over here for students. We're going to partner with students in developing and thinking about how the future of assessment is going to look, for example. We're not going to uncritically let chatbots loose into the wild. We're going to think about how and when it's appropriate to utilize agentic AI. And we're going to have these critical conversations and foster them within the campus community. So I think not leaving individual educators to navigate this tidal wave by themselves is important. But yeah, in many ways, I think being true to the values of open education is being true to the values of being an educator, and particularly a critical educator. And so I don't think it's a bad friction to come to the fore.
Great, thank you. I realize that Elizabeth Childs has already left, but I'd really like to just jump to her question as the very last question, and then we'll wrap up. So knowing that historically in EdTech, we've invested extensive time, money, effort, distracted by attempting to research whether online is equal to face-to-face learning, could you speak to what you see as the highest need for research in this space? With limited research funding available, what are the top priorities in order to inform the direction taken with AI? Sorry, that's quite a chunky question for the very last moment. Shironica, would you like to go first?
Well, yeah, research is very important. Yeah. Well, now well, even if we do not have, large funding, we could do small interventions within our capacity, which could develop into larger projects eventually. And, when group of people do interventions within, I'm talking with my experience now, within our university, within our faculty, the small intervention has made a very good impact. I know because some of the participants are here in today's audience as well, from our faculty. And I know even though it's a small, we got very little funding from Commonwealth of Learning supported us, but that small intervention made a huge impact in our case. So I think there are so many things happening all over the globe like that. Funding is a problem for large scale things, but I think these small things also matters. So anyway, this research and interventions, I think rather than just researching in the sense this now the intervention I did, it was collaborative action research. So collaboratively together we explored these things, and together we found solutions, and it's an ongoing thing. So I believe that sort of interventions, practice-oriented interventions are more important to find out solutions.
Great, thank you. And Rajiv?
I'll try to add to it very quickly. And Elizabeth is such a fabulous researcher at Royal Roads University here in British Columbia as well. I think she's right to point to not the importance of not being distracted by silly things over here. One thing I think research could do is shed clear light on the gap between the promise and the reality, right? yes, it's going to make education all the more efficient in all of these wonderful ways, but I would focus on the learning process. What does learning look like? What does teaching look like? How is it changing things for students? Just as a simple example from my own background in psychology, there was research, 15 years ago that showed when you're traveling as a tourist around the world and you're taking photographs extensively of landmarks that you're visiting, you're actually delegating some of that working memory, and your retention, your recollection of those spaces is actually lower when you're running around taking those photographs a whole lot. So what does it do to the learning process? How does it intersect with metacognition, with learning science, really? So not just, again, uncritically buying the sales literature, but how is it actually impacting learning? How are educators navigating some of these decisions and design decisions when it comes to redesigning the learning environment in this context? What is that being influenced by? These days, I'm sorry to say, I see a lot of fear-based decision making when it comes to the learning environment, and I feel that if it continues too far down that track, you can end up in an environment where you can absolutely take DNA swabs for students as they walk into an exam room that's effectively a Faraday cage. Great, but you're really etching away at the core purpose and joy of community and learning in that space. So I would focus research on the learning process, and interrogating some of those lofty claims coming out of the Silicon Valley. Yeah, and I think if there's other ways in which institutional capacity, training and development could benefit from that research, the better it would be.
Thank you. That's great. Beck, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tom. And thank you so much, Shironica and Rajiv, for just such a fantastic session. And to everybody who's contributed to the chat with the Q&A and questions. I have a feeling we could keep talking for some time around these issues, needless to say. So we look forward to seeing you and continuing the conversations over the coming sessions that we've got coming up as well. So yeah, just without further ado, a massive thank you again to Shironica and Rajiv for today's session. It's been really wonderful to have you with us. So thank you so much for being here today, and thank you everyone for joining us around the world as well. It's great to have you with us. Thank you.